running through the streets of London, trying to get to that meeting, and he woke up and realized, of course, it had been canceled. So I think we're all starting to feel a little bit of cabin fever. So it's great that we're able to have you here and take this little break to learn about what opportunities the world has to change the energy system. So I hope that everybody online will enjoy this as well. What I really like about your program is that we have that it's something that we can implement right now. There are a lot of technologies that we highlight that are very much looking out towards the future, and they're really ambitious and potentially quite transformative. But you have a technology and a system that you're actually utilizing now that helps bring about real change immediately. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about that. So if you can share your screen, we can get started.
Great, Randy. Thank you.
Hey, Bonnie, if you could hit the green share screen button at the bottom of your Zoom window.
I did. Okay. Sorry about this. This is a little technical glitch. Things moved around as we were getting organized. Sorry, help me again, please.
So if you move your mouse to the bottom, there's a green button, share screen.
Yeah, I did that. I'm all set there.
And then you'll see options for what to share, whether that's, and you click on the PowerPoint presentation.
That should be it.
There you go. So let's put that into slideshow mode and we can get going.
All right, thank you. It is in slideshow mode.
If you could hit F5 or from the beginning, Bonnie.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Just one moment, please.
You should be able to hit F5.
I have hit F5.
You might need to click inside a PowerPoint.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I hit F5. There you go. All right, so let's get started. Sorry about that technical delay. First, thank you to the Atlantic Council for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of the Earth Week lineup. And today we're talking about sustainable biofuels and how they can contribute to a healthier world, economic recovery, and bending the global warming curve to avert disaster and disruption. I'd like to say that these are sustainable biofuels focused on the heat and power sector, and they're not a one-size-fits-all solution, but I will say they can be an important part of a country's energy portfolio and support the country's clean energy transition. So first, to give you a little bit of background about E3 International, we provide sustainable energy project development, finance, and advisory services to help our clients achieve their energy, economic, and environmental goals. We partner with organizations like EBRD, USAID, governments, enterprises, research institutions to scale up clean energy investment around the world. So with that, let me move on to my next slide. And let's talk about sustainable biofuels. They grow on what we call short rotation wood biomass plantations or short rotation coppices. And just to give you a sense for what the plants look like or the sticks look like when you put them in the ground, they start a few inches long and they're grown from seeds, of course, but when they're implemented, they go in at a few inches long. And they quickly grow to several feet high, sometimes at the rate of 3 centimeters a day. But basically, over the course of 3 years, they become large enough to harvest. So they go from tiny sticks to large sticks. And in a 20-year life cycle of the plant, when they're harvested, they're not eliminated from the soil, they're simply cut. And so after year 3, you have a harvest. And then every 1, 2, or 3 years, they can be harvested again for the full life cycle of the plant for 20 years. So that is the way they work. They can be co-located with other renewable energy sources, which makes it an interesting, even more interesting investment. Wind, geothermal, solar thermal greenhouses all fit into that rural environment and really make it interesting. Basically, though, I wanted to talk too about how the context, methods, and partners matter. So not every country is the same. It's really going to depend on land availability, government policy, the energy mix in terms of whether sustainable biofuels are a good fit. The methods matter too around sustainability in terms of creating a positive environmental impact or a negative one. So precision irrigation, using cover crops, all of the things that go into sustainable farming, including buffers, really make a difference in your outcome in terms of environmental impact. And partners really matter too. We're looking at a situation not to maximize profit, but to provide a reasonable return to the investors and meet environmental, social, and governance compliance targets. And when you do all that, there can be a lot of benefits to sustainable biofuels. Basically, they have a positive return on investment after plus or minus 5 years, an opportunity for rural job creation, energy security because the energy is being produced locally, and it's doing so in a non-toxic way up and down the value chain. It promotes rural economic development. It mitigates forest deforestation, and in some cases there's deforestation or just demand pressure on the supply of wood. It's an opportunity for market creation and innovation, and by that I mean a biomass market where you have logistics centers and market centers, and this allows long-term offtake contracts and also bioeconomy innovation, products that may not be specific to the sustainable biofuels but related as part of the effort, whether it's feedstock or whether it's medicine that can also be grown from the crop. Air pollution reduction we'll get into in a few minutes. There's a lot of opportunity there. It also provides for carbon sequestration in the soil if there are sustainable methods used, and land restoration so that after 20 years the land can be used for food production. It's a renewable resource, as I mentioned. You can harvest after the 3rd year every 1, 2, or 3 years. It supports the SDGs, all 17 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It helps meet Paris climate targets. And in addition, there are mitigation benefits and adaptation benefits. As far as resilience goes for adaptation, you mitigate soil erosion, you mitigate flooding. It's a heat sink, it's a windbreak. All kinds of good benefits from these short rotation plantations of sustainable biofuels, and they're scalable and replicable. So with that, these are really an opportunity around the world, but I'd like to offer today a case study for the Western Balkans, just to quickly give you some context. And what we have in the Western Balkans, and specifically in Serbia, is 1.6 million hectares of abandoned, degraded land, much of which it's just government owned. This is not unusual in other Western Balkan countries due to the migration from the rural areas to the urban areas over the last 25 years. There's a need for energy security, and that's locally produced energy, but energy that's produced in an environmentally friendly way and in an economically feasible way. There's a growing interest in biomass, renewable resource. There are a lot of forests, and there's an interest in using it, especially as they can help meet the climate targets. In addition to that, we have underemployed and unemployed farmers. Sorry, I switched that too soon. And that's a huge need to find more work for the farmers so they can make their living sustainably. There's no functioning biomass market. And so that leads, as I mentioned, to price variation and inequities. And that's a concern. So if biomass was produced at scale in a sustainable manner, there would be an opportunity for long-term agreements to make these investments. Deforestation is an issue. There would demand pressures. It really depends on the country how bad this is. In some cases, it would appear to be on a sustainable plan in the native forest, but in fact, there's illegal cutting, or they're growing pressures around more pellet companies or more cogen. So there's a need for a sustainable source that's not just from the native forests. And the poor air quality you've probably heard in the press this year, particularly in Bosnia and Serbia and other of the Western Balkan countries, they've been very high in the air quality index, above 100, the most days by far among the European countries this year. And it's a health concern that's elevated to the highest level of the government. So then that is largely coming from the lignite combustion, because now during COVID-19, the cars are not running, but the pollution is still there. So in terms of looking at where we're focused in Serbia, we're working in the agricultural heartland, but also this agricultural heartland, which is Vojvodina province, has 200,000 hectares of abandoned land suitable for short rotation plantations for sustainable biofuels. So we're in partnership with the senior leaders of Vojvodina province. We have a memo of understanding to work on green initiatives. And this is one of the key initiatives. And I wanted to point out again, we're working in the low-level cadasters that are not for food production. And we've decided to call our initiative, because it's broadly applicable around the world, the Sustainable Land and Energy Initiative. And to achieve scale, we are creating the Sustainable Serbia Finance Facility. And the overall mission is to improve rural land, rural lives, and the environment. And basically, we're focused on scaling up $1 billion or more in private investment to support this work. And a key part of this is the short rotation wood biomass plantations. That's about 30%. In addition, we have the sustainable energy farms, which could be many of them co-located where the resource is appropriate, solar thermal greenhouses for the farmers, and investment in 10 million new additional trees, permanent trees on non-agricultural lands as part of the donor-driven part of this work. And this was this effort was inspired in part by the Tropical Landscape Finance Facility in Indonesia and the Sustainable India Finance Facility in Andhra Pradesh in India, both of which have achieved a lot of success and were developed in coordination and with the inspiration of Assistant Secretary General UNEP Satya Tripathi. But looking at a key driver of the short rotation plantations, not just in Serbia and the Western Balkans, but really anywhere in the world where you're burning coal, and especially coal lignite, which is the lowest form, you can see comparing biomass, the heating value is considerably higher, almost twice as high. And when you look at the emissions factors for the biomass is significantly lower. And as far as carbon dioxide goes, it's a carbon neutral fuel. So rather than looking at the world in terms of having to make tremendous capital investment, our approach was to see where could we make an impact without requiring huge capital investment, because of course that takes time. And given the IPCC goals of our targets of reducing warming by keeping it to 1.5 degrees Celsius or under 2.5 by 2030, we need to have some fast approaches, as Randy said, some things we can do now. And one of those things is co-firing biomass up to 20% with coal. So in the existing coal burners, boilers, we can achieve that. And you can see it affects the carbon dioxide emissions, but most importantly, it affects the polluting smog. And that's just with 20% co-firing. And if we look to the district heating example, we can also see that there is an impact. And this is in part because it's a carbon neutral fuel. But when you look over at the smog component, you can see that the SOx is definitely decreasing. And there's an opportunity there. But the impact on emissions doesn't really matter unless it's cost competitive. And the cost competitive analysis, the cost comparison here between lignite with the black for electricity generation, natural gas for the blue, and biomass for the green shows that across a long array of price points, up to a point you probably wouldn't even grow it, biomass is very competitive. And in fact, studies have shown that biomass can be produced even lower, but we are focusing on probably biomass production in this range based on the analysis we've done, the 30 to 35 euros per ton. Going over to heat generation, you can see, again, biomass is a very attractive and cost competitive alternative. So with all of that in mind, then we recognized that our Sustainable Serbia Finance Facility needs to coordinate the resources to make all of this come together so that the initiative can be scaled up to make the kind of impact that we want to achieve. First and foremost, we go back to our relationship with Vojvodina province and the government-owned land that's been abandoned, and working with them with the approval of the Republic of Serbia to have these land concessions, either land leases or long-term arrangements for the farmers to move forward. In addition, we're working with donors to provide grant funding into the mechanism, into the facility, to be passed through for capacity building and technical assistance to make this happen, so that these short rotation plantations for sustainable biofuels can be implemented in the most environmentally friendly and appropriate way. And also the other resource is, the other resource is the banks and coordinating finance so that we have concessional blended finance loans that can be have a grace period for the farmer's initial 3-year startup period and an early investment, and be of a long enough tenor so that it financially makes sense and yet is still attractive from the lender's side. And this is all made possible through the biomass sales to the off-takers over here, whether it's the electric company, district heating companies, or a global industrial off-taker, of which there are some. And you can see that they would be investing in the equipment and the clones to make this all happen. But in fact, the capital stack is a bit more complicated. And I won't get too bogged down in this, but you can see that this is really a blended finance initiative where we're combining public purpose money to scale up private investment. And so the development finance institutions, the DFIs up here, are willing to take the risk. And in part, that's because the donors have worked to create or enable the ESG certification. And for that, we are working with C4ICRAF, the world's leading agroforestry and forestry research institution, an intergovernment organization. And they will be doing that work for us. They also worked with the TLFF in Indonesia, which I mentioned, and the SIFF in India, which I mentioned. In addition, we'll create this revolving credit facility through the local banks. And one key partner in this work for us is the Development Fund of Vojvodina. They are transitioning to a green bank and becoming an accredited entity so that they can receive funds from the Green Climate Fund. And that in turn, that low-cost concessional money will help make this investment more attractive. The funds flow through the asset manager for the reasons of transparency and accountability, so that all the stakeholders can have a window, and the funds flow through to the farm cooperatives to scale up the short rotation plantations. And as I mentioned, in some cases, there will be co-located energy projects for wind or geothermal. And then the biomass market at scale, as it's planned, will enable the offtake agreements by the electric company or by the district heating companies or by the industrial off-takers. And these are the project finance, that's the basis on which project finance is driven, a long-term commitment at a set price. Other things to consider in all of this is that the objective long-term is to bundle all these loans together and securitize them into a green bond. And that will take away the need for the donor money and keep the cycle going. So what we're envisioning here for the Sustainable Serbia Finance Facility, but it could be really at any location in any country, is an opportunity for very significant rural job creation, like one person per every 5 hectares, we're assuming. So 20 to 30,000 new jobs or partial jobs at least, bringing these people up to the farmers up to full employment. If you look at energy security, and this is really not where we're going, 100% reliant on biomass, but you can see that you could achieve 100% energy security with only 10% of the abandoned land with this initiative. And only 1% of it is going to the other renewables. So clearly we can make a big impact with just a piece of the abandoned land. A key part of this is protecting native forests. We're going to do more than that and plant new trees, reducing air pollution. I showed you how the impact there. Really a key part is a biomass market for logistics and coordination, and even the creation of a biomass stock market. This is important for offtake and stable prices, and it will be based on the one that was done in Lithuania. Blended finance for the scale up. This aligns too with the EU Energy Barge Initiative, which runs along the Danube, which is part of Vojvodina province, located across Vojvodina province in the southern end. It aligns with the European Green Deal, which will again be focused on the protection of the native forests, so then creates a greater need for the biomass. And another similar initiative, Dendermass for EU. We're supporting many of the SDGs, probably 5 of them to a high degree and the rest of them less so. But this also can highlight Serbia's leadership as a vice president of the upcoming COP26. And finally, there's some really interesting opportunities for bioeconomy innovation, not just around the wood, but around the elements of the wood that can be used for medicine or feedstock. You can cut off a part, the top part of the plant, just a few centimeters, and that's particularly rich in nutrition for animal food. And this, I think, is the most important, is because it shows how we can achieve private investment at scale in a country where there's very limited public resources, and we can leverage that donor money to really make an impact. So with that, Randy, I think I'll turn it over to you for questions and answers.
Great, Bonnie. Thank you so much. If you can stop sharing your screen, and then we can go to Q&A. We've already got a number of good questions in the Q&A. Remember to use the Q&A function if you have questions. One question from me to start. You focused on your work in Serbia, but you mentioned that you could scale this internationally. What are the key traits of a country that you're looking for? What are the key traits you're looking for in other countries where you might develop this type of initiative?
Well, I think it does go right to context. You have to have the available land. You would not want to take land away from food security, from agricultural food production. So some sort of abandoned, degraded land. You want to have government policy and government cooperation that would support it. And you really want an energy mix where you could move the needle. If a country was already well into no carbon renewables, that wouldn't make sense. But if there is something like coal being used heavily, fuel, oil, other fossil fuels, then it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I want to get to the audience. We've got a bunch of good questions from Vinette Sharma. You've touched on some of them, but one that I think would be worth digging into is there a way in which biomass production could lead to further environmental degradation, like soil erosion or higher carbon footprint, if you're not careful in how you develop the projects?
Oh, I think it could. That's why first of all, working with C4ICRAF is so important to us, and understanding the most sustainable methods along with our local experts from the University of Belgrade. Sustainable methods make all the difference. Cover cropping, to restore the soil even before we plant, precision irrigation, managing the amount of nutrients that go in the land. These crops do a good job of preventing erosion. They do a good job of preventing flooding. But what you put on the land really matters, and how you do it can lead to really positive outcomes, even carbon sequestration and better soil than when you started.
Got it. Thank you. A question from Chris Martius. Are there plans for competing use of the abandoned government land that could jeopardize your work? So, or is the government really bought in to what you're doing? I think specifically in Serbia.
I think anywhere where you have a lot of government-owned land, there's certainly a lot of interest. The fact of the matter is we only need a small percentage of it. And I think it's, as the Nature Conservancy pointed out in the Wednesday webinar, you go for where is a low impact place or the highest return place. So in a portfolio of demands on the government land, where there's active agriculture for food, that may be using agricultural waste for biogas. And where there is, an opportunity for short rotation wood biomass, that's where that should be focused. So it really, a portfolio approach makes sense. We're not asking for all of the government-owned land. As I mentioned, less than 10% of it will create 100% energy security.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, a question from Harriet Kildall. I'm not going to get that name right. Kildall, I think. She thanks you for the great presentation and wants to know what the water usage is for this type of biomass.
That's a great question. There have been clones. We're breeding clones to be suitable for the environment that we'll be working in. So adapted from Sweden, there is an initial need for irrigation. It helps to be near an irrigation infrastructure. But agriculture is advancing in such a way that precision agriculture can minimize the amount of irrigation needed. But the fact of the matter is you get very competitive, cost-effective leads with less irrigation. You really double your yields, or you increase them dramatically with irrigation. So it's really a judgment call. What are the resources available?
Got it. A good question from Curtis Jones. Does this biofuel process create invasive species if left unattended?
Oh, that's another really good one. First of all, we're making sure to use native species in what we're choosing, which is a willow. Willow and poplar are the two native species that we're focused on, but really willow. Native species are a problem everywhere, and how they're managed is really a choice between harsh chemicals or more sustainable or organic chemicals. So, we're not to the point where I can address the specific invasive species, but the approach in general is to minimize the adverse chemical consequences.
Got it. Okay, we're running short of time. I'm going to get to two more questions. One from Jonah. In the biofuel production process, is there an opportunity for pairing what you're doing with anaerobic digestion to just waste organic material to produce biogas?
Well, we're not digesting, we're making wood chips, and the wood chips will be burned.
If there is any waste from your process, if there's...
Oh, it could be used? No, I think our waste would be used for the wood chips. I mean, typically wood waste is turned into pellets and chips. Mm-hmm. But we're complementary to biogas, not in competition with biogas.
Got it.
We're like a base load heat and power source.
Final question, and this is sort of combining from two people, from an Andrew and an anonymous attendee, asking if U.S. companies can get involved and if there are any opportunities for this type of project in the U.S. where it might make sense.
First of all, yes, I think the U.S. certainly has opportunities. In this specific initiative, we're welcoming all partners. We're delighted to have the partners we have involved and engaged already, which range from NGOs, private enterprise.
To Bonnie, if you want to get involved. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. So I'm very sorry that I was not able to get to every question that was asked. There were a bunch of good ones. But this presentation will be available, and Bonnie is very easy to access, and I'm sure would be happy to talk about it. Thank you all for tuning in, especially Bonnie. You can follow Bonnie on Twitter at Bonnie L. Norman. I hope you all will join us for the next installation of Innovation Stream with Jennifer Holmgren, Chief Executive Officer of LanzaTech, who will discuss a carbon-smart circular economy next Wednesday, April 29th at 2:30 p.m. I also invite you to join us for a virtual fireside chat with Neil Chatterjee, chairman of the FERC, on April 28th from 2 to 3 p.m. Special thanks today to Olga Kokova, Matali Merla, Gray Johnson, Jackson Styron, and Zainab Wirnanen for making this event happen. presentation will be available on the Atlantic Council website, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, so please do share it with your colleagues. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, Randy.